and they can make a call collect. But nevertheless, I spent a long time over the 3 months. Then finally, he was convicted. Well, I got hold of his trial transcripts, and there were 2,000 pages worth of documents.
Oh my God!
Over Thanksgiving of 1980, I took these transcripts home and read them. That's all I did during those 4 days of holiday, and they pretty much confirmed what he had been telling me over the 2 prior months, namely that he was convicted based on the testimony of 2 people. An eyewitness claimed that he heard gunshots when he was passing by, and he saw Chiefy, who he knew. Chiefy was no angel. He was a heroin addict, and he was a man of the street. He never killed anybody, but he was a heroin addict who lived that life to its fullest. And the eyewitness who claimed that he saw Chiefy flee the scene of the crime along with another man who he also identified, they were fellow drug addicts. And then the other witness against him was another heroin addict from Newark who Chiefy knew from the streets as well, Richard Delasante. But Delasante, as it turned out, and we later learned, was a career informant for the Essex County Prosecutor's Office. If he had ever, he always had a bunch of outstanding crimes and charges and arrests on his rap sheet. And if he ever got convicted and ended up in state prison, he was a dead man. I'm talking about Richard Delasante, the career criminal who told Chiefy's jury that Chiefy confessed to him when they were in the county jail together. So these were the 2-star witnesses. So I read the transcripts, and I had a lot of questions to ask Chiefy when I came back from Thanksgiving. I did. We had hours of conversation, and finally, now we're in December of 1980, and he said to me, he said, "You've asked me a billion questions, and I've answered every one." He said, "Do you have any other questions?" I said, "No, actually, I don't, Chiefy." He said, "Let me ask you a question. Do you believe I'm innocent?" And I said, "Well, yeah, I do believe you're innocent." Then he said, and this is what really got me, it shook me, "What are you going to do about it?" I said, "What do you mean? What do you mean? What am I going to do about it? I don't know anything about. I don't know anything about murder, investigation, legal, lawyers. I know nothing about that. I'm a former businessman, and I'm currently a seminary student studying scriptures and church history and theology, for God's sake." He said, by this time he's calling me Jim. He said, "Look, Jim, I've been on my knees for the last 6 years, praying to God to bring somebody to connect with me and help free me. You might not know it, you might not want it, but you are that man. I believe God has brought you to my cell to free me and exonerate me."
That's
so. Then he said, and this is what really got me, "What are you going to do? Are you going to, if you believe I'm innocent, are you just going to go back to your safe, secure little seminary and pray for God to somehow find somebody to free me? That's not going to get me out of here. God works through human hands. Your hands must be the pair to free me." And so
he was
that
so
really
sure.
shook me. He challenged me. I mean, it was a direct. He did it in a good way. It wasn't a hostile or a threatening, or he just did it plaintively. So I went back to the seminary, Harriet, with that, and I went to where I usually would go, and that is back to the scriptures. And I happened to open up, as I'm deliberating on this and reflecting on it, I opened up Isaiah 59. And in Isaiah 59, when I read what I was reading, I was struck by it, because Isaiah talks about how truth has fallen from the public squares, that there is no justice, and justice is far from us. We look for justice, but there's none. Justice is turned back. The Lord saw and was displeased and wondered that there was no one to intervene. So when I read that word intervene, I thought that was God's way of telling me, you are to intervene on behalf of Mr. De Los Santos That's why I brought you there. That's why I led you to his cell. Now go and try and free him. And I made that this, yes.
And how were you supposed to do that without any law experience or anything?
Well, that's another good question. And, you know, I didn't really think it through like that. I should have, but I didn't. I just felt so passionately for this man and his predicament, and I just felt that I was called to do what I could to do to free him. Now, to answer your question, but I had to finish the semester. I had final exams coming up in January, and I told Chiefy, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take a year off starting February 1st and from school, independent leave. And I'm going to work that full year solely on working on your case, trying to find you a good lawyer, maybe find an investigator. And as it turned out, I did the investigation and raise some money to try and free you. So that was my focus for the next 12 months, from February of 81 to February of 82. Now, but here was my dilemma, Harriet. And as a parent, I'm sure you can really appreciate this. All right. Don't forget, it was just a year and a half prior to December of 1980 that I had told my parents and my family and my friends that I'm leaving the business world and going into the ministry. Well, they were all shocked by that because I had not consulted with them. I had given nobody an indication that this was in the offing. So that was a year and a half ago when I stunned my parents with that decision. And by the way, they were surprised and somewhat skeptical, but they supported me. Now I come back to my mother and father, and I have a sit down with them because I'm now going to tell them that I've made another decision. I'm going to take a year off from school, but don't worry, Mom and Dad. Don't worry. When I return after the year, I'm going to finish my education, get my degree, and get ordained as a church pastor. But in the meantime, I'm taking a year off, and I'm going to work to free a man I believe is innocent. He's in prison for murder. He's got a life sentence. He was a former heroin addict out of Newark, but I believe he's innocent. Well, you can imagine. Yeah. I mean, you know, they rightfully thought maybe I've lost it. But again, after some conversation, they supported me, but they were, especially my mom, she was, and I hadn't thought about this. She said, well, Jimmy, if you do this, first of all, what do you know? You don't know anything about murders and investigation and the law. What are you going to do? And besides that, she said, Newark's a dangerous city. I won't be able to sleep at night, just like when you were in Vietnam. I couldn't sleep. Well, I hadn't thought about that. But still, as much as I felt for my mom, that did not deter me, and I decided to embark on this path to try and move the ball forward to see if I could help free Mr. De Los Santos.
What a great place to close up our discussion here. And Jim, will you come back and talk to us and continue your story about how this case unfolded? Are you able to do that?
Sure, I'd be happy to, Harry.
That's wonderful. All right, so I am just delighted that we have begun this fascinating journey of the formation of Centurion Ministries, which right now hasn't been formed yet, but we will find out some more in our next podcast. So please tune in for our next podcast. And Jim, thank you so much for being with us today. And my listeners, see you next time on Pursuing Justice.